Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here and to give you a bit of a whirlwind tour in terms of what we're doing in healthcare and life sciences and why it matters. Behind me, you see a picture. And that picture you could sum up with what got us here will not get us where we need to be. We call this Eroom's law, which is Moore's law in reverse. And this shows the productivity of pharma R&D over the last 70, 80 years. And this is exponential. So it's just going down. So the amount of drugs which $1 billion in R&D investment gets you has been going down from around 100 in the 1940s to less than 1. And this is obviously not sustainable. So we think that AI can be a key element in solving that solution. And why do we need AI? We need AI because the space is just so vast. So if you look at all the potential chemicals which could be drug candidates, we're 10 to the 60 different options. And if you look at all the proteins which could be drug candidates, we're at a 10 to 160. Just to put that into perspective, the number of atoms in the universe are like 10 to the 80. So the number of atoms in the universe is somewhere in the middle between the number of molecules and the number of proteins, which are potential drug candidates. So in short, this is just an unimaginable huge number. But AI can help. Sometimes I say drug discovery is a little bit like this old saying, you lose your keys and you start looking for your keys under the lamppost because that's where you have light, instead of looking where you might have lost them. So here we have a lamppost, which is what we know, and we tend to look around that lamppost. What AI can do is get us a spotlight. So we can actually start to look at the space in a much more systematic way. And you see a few of the examples which are kind of increasing our light in this area. We have hyena DNA, we have AlphaFold, we have DiffDock, we've got Neuroplexer, and all of these tools are allowing us to more systematically query the space. And it's working. I mean, we're already seeing generative AI workloads along the entire value chain of pharma. So it starts with foundational AI model for genomics. In preclinical, there's a lot of work going into histopathology. In clinical development itself, there's clinical writing and study design optimization, finding the right trial sites, which can increase the chance of success of your clinical trials for a given biology. And then it goes all the way into how do you interact with payers and providers, and also how do you manufacture your drugs. And here, digital twins and generative AI for pharma manufacturing and supply chain is, again, a huge opportunity because there's billions of dollars being spent on plants all over the world right now. And just a small error or something that's not configured quite right in setting up your plant, when you discover this when your plant is built, it's very expensive to fix. If you discover it while your plant is still in a simulation, it's much easier to fix. And we're not the only ones who believe that this is going to be a big impact. So these are some figures from McKinsey, and they're estimating the expected value annually for those different stages along the pharma life cycle, along pharma value chain. And again, here, R&D, commercial, then clinical development, and then operations, and to some degree medical affairs, is where they see the biggest value. Changing tack a little bit. So one of the things, I don't get it asked that much anymore, but I was asked this question quite a lot when ChatGPT just came on the scene. And people ask, so why? Why now? Why is this suddenly working? And there are 3 elements to AI which have to come together. And the one is data, the other one is compute, and the third one is algorithm and talents. And with ChatGPT, some of the algorithms actually we've had for a long time. Machine learning and artificial intelligence per se is not new. But what supercharged it into being and what got us the ChatGPT moment was that we suddenly had powerful enough compute and we had a lot of data. We had the internet to basically look into. And keep that thought in mind. So now, when we're looking at data in our space, in biotech and pharma, we've made some progress. So if we look at what have we done over the years, so starting in the 2000s up to now 2020s, and the amount of biological intelligence, we're coming from measuring. We're coming from DNA sequencing, RNA sequencing, long-read sequencing, but then at some point we crossed this dotted line and we actually were able to go into modeling. And that's a crucial difference because modeling allows you to predict. It allows you to kind of push the boundaries of knowledge. In what I said before, it allows you to open up or to have a wider spotlight. But, as I said to you before, hold the thought of that ChatGPT was made possible by the internet. More or less every data domain we have outside large language, outside human language, is orders of magnitude smaller than the data we have on the internet. There's different estimations, so this is a fairly conservative, that we have around 10 to the 14 tokens for large language models, so basically the internet. Once we go into other applications like self-driving cars, robotic foundation models, and even protein models, and for proteins, we have a lot of data. We have a lot of also genome sequences, we have a lot of expression data. That's the best we have. And already there, we are at least 2 orders of magnitude less. And crucially, the internet, everybody had, now we're seeing more and more parts of the web being locked up and having do not train stickers plastered all over them, but at least the original scrape of the internet is available to everybody. A lot of this other data is siloed and proprietary. It's not even nobody, while everybody in theory could get access to the 10 to the 14 tokens for the LLMs, the tokens for protein models and for all other domains are much more fragmented into smaller pockets. And that basically means we need to adjust also our expectation. Just the power which we see in LLMs, the same power will just take a lot more time, a lot more effort in biotech because we just don't quite have the same data. But again, it's a great opportunity also to work on to solve that problem. And actually, one of the ways we're trying to solve it around robotic foundation models, for example, is to use simulated models, simulated data. And I will show you an example at the end of my talk. The other element is compute. And this is the group d'études géopolitiques at École Normale Supérieure. And they put out a report where they basically summed it up in one sentence that by 2030, economic and technological freedom will have a price, and that price is GPUs. Which is why it's so prescient that Serbia is now working on its 3rd supercomputer. Because if you look at this next chart, which comes from the same report, you have in blue the amount of AI compute which is located in the US. So dark blue hyperscalers, lighter blue others. And then in gray, you have rest of world. I would roughly equate that to China. And then you have 4%. 4% of worldwide AI compute sits in Europe. So this is our future. If we don't invest in our own compute, together with capabilities for data generation, data access, then we're giving away our future and somebody else will do it. Okay, so I also promised you, I have about the second half of my talk to kind of give you an overview of what we're doing now. And I want to start this with one thing. I give you a gift. This took me 1 year to understand. And this is what is accelerated computing. So if you read anything about NVIDIA, we love to talk about accelerated compute. But what accelerated compute is to run things in parallel that can and should be run in parallel. Why is this so critical? It's critical because our computing paradigms are built on the CPU. like the central processing unit, because this is all we had. But a CPU, by its design, works through things sequential. So this is like if you have a nightclub and you want to get people in, you have a bouncer. You have one door, one bouncer, and he lets in people one by one. That makes complete sense because it depends who you want to have into your club, depends who's already inside. So this is a sequential problem. This is why nightclubs have bouncers. There's a reason football stadiums don't have bouncers. Because football, like filling a football stadium, is a parallel problem. It does not matter who's in there already, whether or not you're gonna get in. So it doesn't make sense to only have a bottleneck and funnel everything through one bouncer. It doesn't make sense to treat this problem in sequence. And so this is what we do with accelerated computing. We're basically, for problems that could be done in parallel, we're building 30, 300, 300,000 doors to do it in parallel. And that is the power of the approach, because suddenly you see a 1,000x, 10,000x speed up, because you're doing things no longer one by one, but you're doing them in parallel. So it took me a year to figure this out. How do we do it? The problem is you can't just take the program you're running on CPUs and run the same problem on GPUs. You have to fundamentally rewrite things. You have to, you have to fundamentally rewrite things. You have to rewrite your libraries. And that's what we do. So we're basically accelerating healthcare and all sorts of other domains by creating parallel libraries, which we're putting out into the open for people to use. So this allows you to stand on the shoulders of giants. You don't have to worry about how do I do my data frames in parallel. You basically just pick the rapid library from NVIDIA, you put it in there, and you can actually focus on delivering real value. And we're doing this across all these different domains, and happy to basically for you to look this up, happy for you to use this and to build on top of it. Now, AI has gone also through different phases. So the first phase was perception AI. I don't know, probably everybody still remembers those kind of things. Is this a puppy or is this a muffin? So when AI was at that stage, and this is still very useful. We're using this in medicine a lot for image recognition, like for medical images, like is this the spleen, is this the liver? And yeah, so this was the first thing we did. And then the second step was generative AI. So really having AI which is not just saying, yes, this is a puppy or this is a muffin, but which can actually tell you a story about the puppy or the muffin. And the way we apply this in healthcare is what we call lab-in-the-loop workflows. So this is about really bringing together the data, as I said before, it's like the fuel for everything, with like the simulation. And you can use, so we have on the one hand, we have the wet lab. That's the lab as we know it, like think of benches, pipettes, plates. And then on the other side, we have the dry lab, which is the AI factory. And you can start anywhere, it's a loop. But so let's say you start in the wet lab. You've made some molecules. You test their biochemical properties, and now you have data. Now you use all this data and all your historical data to create a model which can predict what sort of molecules have the properties you're looking for. And then you then you can design those in the computer. You can design therapeutic candidates. But then, of course, I mean, it has to work. You don't want hallucinations. So what you do, you basically make them, you run the experiment, you get data whether your predictions was right or not, that improves your model, and this way you're actually starting a positive flywheel effect, which is what we call lab in the loop. And you will see a few of these because NVIDIA, we're fundamentally about ecosystems. As I said, we are an enabler. We work with everybody, and we think, or we believe, it's our fundamental belief that all of this has to be done as an ecosystem approach between software vendors, between the tech biotechs, and between big pharma. And so we're working with all of these and trying also to make the right connections to really push the field forward here. The next step after generative AI is agentic AI. So what is an agentic AI comes in different flavors and a lot of different applications in pharma. So it can be used in research and discovery, for example, for literature search. It can be used for regulatory documentation, or also for clinical trials. What is agents? So again, this is one of the terms which is thrown around a lot, and often it's used more or less synonymously to an LLM. It's a bit more than just an LLM. In the center, you have a large language model, but that large language model has the ability to plan and reason. So it's able to take a task and break it down into different steps. You don't have to tell it all of the steps. It can actually do that itself and say, okay, I first do this, then I do this, and I probably need that. And in order to do something, in order to kind of make the plan, the agent also has certain tools at its disposal. And these tools can be like a calculator, web search, an SQL search, it can be generate a podcast, it can be all sorts of different things. And then it has memory because it needs to check whether the things it thought it needs to do with the tools at hand are actually successful in solving the task it was given in the first place. And as I said, tools can be anything. So you can also give it tools like to simulate molecules. You can give it tools to do single-cell genomics. You can give it tools to segment medical images. It can really be anything. And it might be easier if I show you an example. This is a biomedical research agent blueprint. Blueprints for us are example applications. So this is nothing you can run in production, but you can take it and very easily develop something on top of it which runs in production. And here we're actually stringing 4 things together. We're stringing together a literature search, hypothesis generation, virtual screening, and report generation. So here we have the biomedical research agent, and it's basically, I'm a computational chemist, I'm interested in cystic fibrosis. And now it basically does the literature search, gives you all the sources, and you can actually look into also expand on it. So now you've done your first literature search to get a better understanding what are seed small molecules for the therapies and what are the disease pathways. Now, in the next step, you go to hypothesis. So the agent takes what it did in terms of literature search and now reasons about it and comes up with a hypothesis, like what's the right target to start with and what are potential molecules, like a potential molecule to start with. In the next step, this agent has the ability to do a virtual screening process. So what it can do, it can actually fold the protein, which is the target, and then it can take the starting molecule and generate variations of that starting molecule, and then dock all of these variations into the protein and basically see which of these is the most likely to dock into here. And then finally, you can actually sum this all up into a report, and you can actually start to go to the lab and actually work on it. And again, here, it is an ecosystem play. Like, we are working with all sorts of different people who are working on agents for all sorts of different applications. And this is a really hot topic in the industry right now. The last frontier is actually physical AI. So we are leaving our computer and we're going into the real world. And it's like, if you think about what is an LM, what's a AI model doing, it takes some input, usually text or images, and it returns some output, usually text or images. Now, in physical AI, the model no longer returns text or images, but it returns action tokens. It returns things that happen in the real world. And these can be all sorts of different things. This can be in a warehouse, like we see a lot of automated warehouses these days, where basically if some boxes fall out of a shelf, the cart can automatically reroute. We see general purpose humanoids, and we also see a lot of those applications in transportation, like, for example, cars, trucks, robotaxis. And in biotech, pharma, the applications are numerous. Like, think about what we could do. We could really run autonomous labs. We could run autonomous warehouses. We could run autonomous factories. And yeah, so this is a bit of an example how some of the things that are happening today, so this is obviously not a pharma factory, but you can do layout planning, you can do inspection, I said warehouses, you can have robotic fleets which are learning in the computer, you can run remote monitoring, or even simulate processes before you're putting them into the lab. And this is important. If you think before, we talked about the lab in the loop, we talked about the wet lab and the dry lab. So now with autonomous labs, you can actually really bring those together. So you could have a lab which has agentic capabilities, which could automatically order certain reagents, probably within some cost framework, and then has robotic arms, knows which machines to use, which experiments to run, and this way you're actually get a whole new quality of data to feed your models. And I promised you to also show you about what we can do in the virtual world with robotics. So one of the big issues in robotics is we just don't have the same training data. We talked about this before. So one of the things we do is we're creating a virtual, a physically accurate world, called an omniverse or a metaverse, and there, it's easier to explain with this. So if I want to teach a robot how to grab this clicker, what I can do is I can either try to demonstrate it, takes a very long time, is very costly, or I can give it to the robot and the robot can try itself. That will probably break the clicker because it's just going to be dropped a million times. So what we do instead, we create this clicker in this physically accurate metaverse, and we have the robot try everything they want in the physical world. And that way nothing gets broken because it's all physical, it's all like a virtual world. And so here we see a robotic arm which can do ultrasounds. And this robotic arm was trained in the virtual world, how to kind of do an ultrasound. So it was able to sort of, okay, if I put the ultrasound head in this way, I get a good image. If I put it on this way, I don't get a good image. So this was all done, trained virtually. And this is 5x, but it really works. Do a liver scan, it knows where the liver is. You don't have to tell it. And then you can say reset. Now you've repositioned it, so the liver is somewhere else. And it, again, will find the liver and can do the scans automatically. And again, robotics, so many different applications, from having people who are in a wheelchair walk again because we have exoskeletons which can self-balance, to orthopedic surgeon robots, soft tissue surgical robots, or also just service robots which are helping in the hospital to alleviate the burden on the healthcare workers. Big ecosystem behind this as well. And I think we talked on this before. We're seeing this today. We're seeing massive value being created both in preclinical and in clinical. And this is just the beginning. We will see so much more happening here. And yeah, I hope there's 3 things I would like you to take home from this talk. The first one is we really need a new paradigm for medicine because the decreasing R&D productivity is not sustainable. Data, compute, and algorithms is the 3 ingredients into AI. And Europe's strength are our data sets and our talent, but we really need to step our game in AI computing and build innovative ecosystems which are also helping us to tap into our data better. And finally, accelerated computing is really helping to run things in parallel. You're decreasing compute time, you're making things possible that were just impossible before. If something takes 9 years, it's impossible. If something takes 9 weeks, it's very possible. That's all. Thank you very much.